Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Accountants for Sexy Change My Mind. Today, I do not have an accountant with me. I have Pratheesh, and Pratheesh serves accountants. And I was lucky enough to go onto his podcast a few months ago, and I just had to get him on actually because I needed to find out more about what he does and how he supports accountants. So I'm very pleased to be bringing him to you today. Welcome, Pratheesh.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Really excited to
You're
be here.
you are very welcome. I see in your bio you're actually quite an interesting guy because yes, you talk about your hometown in India quite a lot, but you also love to teach and dance Latin American dances as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, growing up, I was always kind of shy in terms of putting myself out there. My mother was or is a good classical dancer in one of
Right.
the Indian classical dances, and she used to teach as well. Whereas me, I wanted to dance, but being self-conscious and shy, I could never do that. However, um, a good few years back, then I saw these people dancing salsa in a club,
Yeah.
and reignited my desire to be able to dance. And then finally, I gathered up the courage to go into a dance class, joined up, and yeah, a couple of years later, I was considered good enough to start. It was an interesting journey. I really loved
That,
it though.
that's amazing. I'm just the bios that I get sent don't normally include Latin dancing, so I'm loving that, loving it. And I would love to say that I used to be a dancer back in the day, but I think my hips do lie nowadays. I can't shake it like I used to shake it. So I typically swerve the dance floor these days. Um, we are not here to talk about Latin dancing though, but it was an interesting thing in bio. We were having an offline conversation and we were talking about kindness, generosity, giving, and you said a phrase to me. You said, "Do good and kick it down the river." And
Yeah.
before we go into what it is you do, I just want you to talk about this concept because I want to get this out there into the world.
Um, Again, it all goes back to the early years. At home, my dad, my mom, I always saw them doing things for others. Like making food and feeding other people would be a big part of sort of culture and belief system.
Mm,
And dad often used to tell me stories of my grandfather, his dad, whom I never
mm,
met, on how philanthropic or charitable he used to be. That if Granda saw somebody in a poor condition out on the street, he'd bring them home, bathe them, get them bathed, fed, clothed, and let them go back. And one of the stories we kind of learn while growing up, the title is, it's called Neki Kar Darya Mein Dal, loosely translated into English as do good and throw it in a pond or river. Okay.
okay.
The basic premise is that when you do something nice, do it and forget it. Because if you don't forget it, then you'd want to boast about it. So if you talk about what you have done good, it
Yeah.
is in a way boasting. And our sort of beliefs and teachings uh, try to tell us to shy away from boasting about what you have done. So that's where this comes from. Do something nice and then forget about it. So basically kick it into the river and it'll be gone. Then you don't
Yeah,
think
it's an
about it.
interesting one. So, from a marketing perspective, just with that hat on for a second, and doing good, doing good. I'm going to pre-frame this because I was going to go down the road and people are going to disagree with me. But doing good, for example, feeding somebody who's homeless, should never be used as marketing content. But doing
Absolutely.
good with your client work, Now, that should be boasted about. So before people get the wrong impression, I think we need to, from my perspective, differentiate that. What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, there are two types, right? One is where you are not seeking anything back in terms of payments, for
Yeah.
example. As if you're doing something good for your customer, you expect to be paid for the work you have done. So yes, if it is a professional piece of work, you need to do good by your customer and you should boast about it. Makes complete sense. But the other side is when you're doing it from just a pure humanity's sake or
Being a
kindness,
good
that
person.
you want to do something nice for somebody because you happen to come across a situation where life gave you the opportunity to do something nice,
Yeah.
and you're not seeking anything in return. In that case, yeah, just do it and then keep walking on. Don't think about it.
Yeah, yeah. I one of my core values is kindness. I like being kind. I like encouraging people to be kind. But I think yeah, I think if you're doing good stuff and being a kind person for the wrong reasons, that's not being kind. So it's
Exactly.
an interesting concept. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on because I wanted to cover that because I thought it was lovely. But let's move on. How is it exactly that you help accountants?
So essentially, a couple of ways. Primary being that we provide readily trained and available staff members to as remote task force to kind of supplement or complement their existing team.
Mhm.
So that comes in handy, especially in the times where there's high turnover, your staff are leaving for something different. So we can plug in any gap in terms of manpower. Secondly, we are a software house as well. So we build tailored software tools for accountants, and we've been doing that since 2012. Building in automation, digitization, and essentially anything that can reduce the time they are spending on recurring processes. So these are the two services that we provide, and the third is we also have our own uh, accounting platform, which in certain cases comes in handy for certain types of customers. So these are the three ways we kind of offer our services to the accountants.
Okay. And with the outsourcing, I know that staffing is a big issue in the industry at the moment. It's talked about a lot. And you say you're plugging the gaps, but what are the main challenges that you're seeing in the accounting firms at the moment? Where are the gaps?
Um, First, the one of the biggest gaps at the moment is finding staff, finding your team members to hire internally, because a there is very high demand for good accounting professionals in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about accountancy, accountancy is an in-demand profession. So even in that, um, there is often a shortage of qualified and experienced professionals. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
this means accountancy firms or accountants are actually trying to find people from a very small pool of talent. Then secondly, it's a competitive job market. So because it's a small pool of talent, there are many accountancy firms and there are also other industries trying to dip into that same pool. So you're competing against um, other companies who could be within the industry and are ready to pay much more than what you as an accountant or an accountancy firm can afford. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a challenge. Qualification. So accountancy, you have a lot of regulations. So depending upon what what sector you're focusing on. You might have very specific qualifications required from your candidates, say, for example, CPA or ACCA. This again can reduce the pool of potential candidates that you have access to. So, these are what I find as part of staffing issues that are currently the accountancy firms are facing. When it comes to objections to account outsourcing to fill that gap, that's another set of issues. But yeah, uh,
So
the answer to your question would be this.
do you then
Sorry.
provide staff on both the permanent and part-time, not part-time, but temporary basis? Do you literally plug gaps, or are your staff in there for the long haul?
Both. So we would obviously prefer the long haul, so because that makes it much easier for both sides. But we also do temporary staffing. So basically, sometimes as an accountant or accountancy firm, there are times during the year, let's say, for example, when you're doing your VAT returns for the clients. So at that stage, there is a certain spike in the amount of workforce that you require because you need to spend additional time. So we can then plug in that gap by providing temporary staff um, charged on an hourly basis. So you can essentially scale up and down during any time you want.
So what you mean is they don't accountants that get that rush on at the end of the year, they probably don't need to be as busy as they are. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly. And that also means you don't have to hire people who are working at reduced capacity during rest of the year, but you need them because you know that end of year you need, let's say, 20 people, but rest of the year you only need 5.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Oh, the world that accountants are now in, especially since COVID, did remote working possibilities. Everyone's kind of got hybrid systems in place for their staff. Are you finding that has any effect on your business at the moment?
Absolutely. People. So one of the sort of, you could say, challenges in pre-COVID was the fact that employers, regardless of what sector they were, they would not entertain the thought of letting their staff work remotely for various concerns, be it security and all that aspects, right? And the fact that they would have to buy or build systems which allowed their employees to work remotely, and they were not willing to spend that money. However, when COVID hit, employers had no choice but to let their staff work remotely, which also opened their eyes to certain benefits of that. One, they figured out that there was no definite need for their employees to be in-house at the office. Things were working just fine, even if they were working from home. Second, they also found that employees did a better job. They worked more when they're working from home or remotely. And third, they were saving a lot of money. So one um, very recently, a customer of ours, they downsized their offices after COVID because they realized they absolutely did not need this humongous office space they had. And now they have reduced it to a quarter of what they were before. They're saving a lot of money just by doing that.
Yeah, I can imagine so. There's a lot of talk at the moment in this space about what size office you need, because if you have a lot of staff that are going to be in a couple of times a week, you still need the capacity to take those staff on and to have somewhere for them to be. But half the time the office is empty, so it feels like it's dead money. So it's a funny conundrum to find themselves in. I would imagine there are more objections to outsourcing. It's still
Oh,
quite a weird concept for many people. So what do you come across?
absolutely. I mean, outsourcing still carries with it quite a lot of negative um, sort of experiences from the past. Now, majority of the times, outsourcing fail is because of few reasons: that you haven't done your due diligence, you haven't really put in the effort to find the right partner, and you haven't given it time. So these are a few things which have caused in the past for outsourcing to fail. However, when it comes to accountancy, and it will be the same with other sectors too, but particularly in accountancy, the objections that primarily come up are: one is quality control. So accountants, by the very nature of their work, need to produce impeccable work for their customers, right? So their primary concern is that if the work is outsourced, eh, they might not get back the standards to which they hold themselves, or that there could be errors which then they will have to sit and fix. So that's quality control would be the number one objection that accountants have. Second, almost equally as a concern that they raise, is security.
Yeah.
So the fact that when you are outsourcing work to a third party, you are transferring sensitive financial data to somebody else. So they would be concerned about the risk of data breaches or other security breaches that could compromise their client's information, which is a very valid concern to have. Third would be communication barriers. So when
Yeah.
generally when we speak about accounting, outsourcing, be it accounting or any other, you're talking about sending work to a slightly lower cost base, right? So, and generally this happens to be in countries which are not known to have very good communication in
Right.
terms of language, right? So communication barriers would be something that they are concerned about. Um, so which again is a valid concern.
Yeah, I
Then
think they're
also
all valid
with
concerns. Like and I've heard people talk about these before. So how are you addressing them? Because how do we get quality control without the accountant having to pore over every single detail? How do you get to the level of trust that there needs to be in order for that to be an effective process?
it takes time. So when I start speaking with accountants, I sort of first general play would be that I would first gauge whether there is a need for them, because if only there's a need, they would be open to the idea of taking on our services. Then we would engage in a sort of understanding that they need to assign one of their staff for a few weeks to actually judge the quality of work that is coming to them
Okay.
from us, right? And that's something kind of sort of, it's a non-negotiable thing, that because if they don't give us their resource to for a couple of weeks to gauge that the work coming back is accurate, then we will never be able to give them that trust.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So there's an internal person allocated to do the QC in festival to make sure that everything is coming back as it should be. So the level of trust should increase over the next few weeks. With just on
Exactly.
that, if would they be dealing with the same person then repeatedly? And what's the risk of that person leaving? Because that would be my concern at that point.
Oh, there is absolutely that is a definite risk, and that's something we also raised to the accountants, and this has happened before. So during the early days, there was a case where we were assigned somebody from our customers, and we worked with them for about 3 months, and they were the main point of contact. Everything was working well. but from the customer side, they did not put in place a mechanism to retain that knowledge of what had been created as a workflow. So this person left
Right.
pretty rather quickly, and the whole process kind of stalled for another
Right.
6 months.
Yeah. So I guess
This
it's similar to any member of staff coming on board. You need to take control of the processes, make sure they're documented, because the more processed the business is, the easier it is for someone to step into their shoes. So if you leave all of that knowledge in the head of whomever you're working with, then there's a risk of that knowledge getting lost.
exactly. And
Yeah.
currently, at the moment, what we do is when we start engaging with a potential customer, we start doing with their approval, we do a sort of knowledge and job shadowing. So basically, our account manager assigned to them sits with them on every interaction to learn how they currently work. We document that on their behalf, and we also share it back with the customer. So in effect, it gives them an added value that now we are
Mm.
preparing a workflow documentation for them. We also get benefit from this, that again, if a case happens where somebody left, we don't have to rely on that person because we now understand what needs to be done. And the second is we use this information to build in efficiencies. So as I mentioned earlier, we also do software. So
Mhm.
we provide options to our customer to enhance the way they are currently doing their processes.
Fantastic. So, by you supporting them with the onboarding of staff members, you're also checking out their processes, helping them document it, and then spotting potentially where you can support them with efficiencies as well.
Correct. And we are in a good position to do that because we have worked with many different types of accountants and
Yeah.
also businesses. So we bring in a kind of diverse set of knowledge in terms of how different people are handling different challenges, and which
Mhm.
allows us to sort of provide a much tailored uh, suggestions for the workflows they have in house.
Mm. So, a question then, I want to come on to security and communication as well in a second, but a question. What size practices do you work with? Because you mentioned that you work with a couple of different types of accounting firms. But is outsourcing better when you have a larger firm with more staff, or can it be with a sole practitioner who needs some extra support?
It's everybody can do. Um, uh, they can provide a better service by taking advantage of a third party to help them with their work. So we work with a single person as
Mm-hmm.
a single sole accountant, and we our biggest customer would have an in-house team of about 60 people.
Okay.
And so the answer is there's no one size where it benefits. The benefits are different based on your size. So if it is a sole accountant, they know they have to rely on themselves, they don't need to worry about anybody else. So now at this stage, they are just trying to use their time in a better fashion by getting somebody else to do the low end work or
Mm-hmm.
majority of the work that they were doing, and they don't have the cost of hiring somebody in house. The larger you get as a firm, you then have the difficulties with staff turnover, hiring, firing, retaining, and all that. So you sort of can then pass on most of the work to a third party outsource provider
Mm-hmm.
and either retrain or refocus your the key players in your internal staff to focus on things like customer experience,
Yeah.
satisfaction levels, business development. So they get different sort of benefits by using outsourcing.
I think that's a really good point actually, because we have to, I say we, the practices that I work with need to keep upskilling their staff, and their staff probably, some do and some won't, or some will and some won't, want to stay in that particular job forever. And especially if we're getting younger people up through the ranks who are coming in with more ambition, that sounded quite ageist, but you understand, like,
Yeah.
the ones that are coming through the ranks that have more ambition, that don't necessarily just want to be doing the work all of the time, that want to get more skilled, that want to have better conversations, we need to be taking their job satisfaction into account much more. And I guess this is a way of relieving them of some of the kind of repetitive work and helping them with the more advisory type stuff that might be coming forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about security. So security is another objection that you come across. So how do you handle that with the data flying across the world?
So it's funny that the majority of the cases, when somebody asks me about security, so generally I would have asked them already about the systems that they use, how their current infrastructure is. So so majority of the times there's such glaring holes in their own security. I'm tempted to reply saying that any other security would be better than what you currently have. So, but
you hold your tongue, Pratheesh.
Jokes aside, so we take security very seriously in terms of all our systems and processes. They have been, over the last number of years, really being sort of tailored with the intention of having security as the guiding principle. So it also starts from the very beginning, that when we take on somebody, they are first given security training in terms of whatever the latest threats are, how to spot spamming or social engineering and all that good stuff. We take them through it. Our facilities, we have two. They are covered by biometric access, so controls. So we are quite sure that nobody without permission or access can enter the building premises. Then internally, from the software side, each system is that the staff is working on, depending upon their access levels. The systems might not even have external peripheral connections like USB ports, etc. The network itself is protected by really industry standard, high quality firewalls. Each laptop or computer would be protected by good antivirus systems and firewalls on them. And then data transfer, because we are GDPR compliant and all data is retained within EU servers, nothing goes out. Even when we have to access a customer's files directly, we work with their IT provider, if they have one, or we would give them that service as well, to set up secure access from outside in a way that minimizes any chance of breaches.
So are there any, because the accountants that you work with must have a range of clients that they work with, are there any particular clients from the accountant's perspective that you wouldn't be able to support, or are your data protocols suitable for every organization?
So far, the only reason we haven't been able to support a particular customer, a client of our customer, would be the fact that they lived in the middle of nowhere and had no digital access. So they literally had to drive in every couple of months with a box full of receipts. And with this particular client, it was not always possible to get the files in time. So it took multiple phone calls, etc. So we could not provide a reasonable time frame for our service. So in that case alone, we said, look, we won't be able to support this for these reasons.
Yeah. So I
But
guess that's
otherwise,
more level of service, is it, than it is for the security of the client.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what about the communication? Because it's the third thing that you mentioned. So once again, I know some of my client base outsource already, and they have amazing communication with theirs. It works particularly well. Some people have tried it and failed. So from your perspective, what's the problem with the communication, and how do you overcome it?
Well, there are two major problems with communication. One would be I'm just limiting it to English speaking regions, right? So let's say we are looking to outsource to somebody in, let's say, India, because that's where I belong to. Now, based on who you approach as a partner, their English might not be on par with international standards. Now, one of the reasons why you would have come across such a provider would be based on the extremely low cost of using them. So once you only look at the cost, then you're more likely to find such providers who might not be able to provide uh, um, team members with good communication in terms of the language skills. The second communication issue that I've come across would be due to the difference in understanding of local things. It could be cultural differences. So sometimes even let's say there was a case where the London Underground customer service was outsourced to an Indian firm. Now, people in this firm have never been in an underground. They don't know what it is. They
Yeah.
don't know what sort of issues people face, and they don't understand the context of it. So, if you're asking such a person to support a customer who has had some issue in the underground, that's unrealistic to
Okay.
expect a good service, right? So, and that is also part of communication issues that they might face, and the, a good way to mitigate that would be to find a provider who has very good knowledge of uh, your local issues, your local
Okay.
culture, people, etc.
So, and this is where my naivety is going to show. So, say the outsource team are supplying or providing the accountant with bookkeeping services.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some of those things should and should not go through the books. So, how accurate are they with the bookkeeping side of things, or what problems might be foreseen?
We have sort of three layers of processes when it comes to, let's say, bookkeeping. One would be the data entry, which is partially automated. So let's say your customer has uploaded a receipt, it gets OCR'd, and as much information as possible is extracted. And some of them using advanced sort of prior knowledge of where each item goes, which nominal code a certain entry belongs to, it is allocated to that. Uh, but then the stuff that the machine cannot do, then the staff get on and they will double check what has already been done by the system. The second, the stuff that the system hasn't done, they would do manual allocation, or correction of the data where required. And the third would be if there was a doubt in their mind, they would first go to their team leaders.
Yeah.
And if the team leader would not have an answer to that, then they would reach back to the customer themselves
Mhm.
saying that we have queries on A, B, and C. So, which would be
Okay.
typically the process that even an accountant employs. So when they are doing your books, if they don't
Yeah.
have
And
information
sneaking
on a
things
certain,
through. Yeah.
we
Okay. So the
yeah,
risk of them sneaking things through is reduced somewhat.
it is reduced. And um, also as a sort of a service provider, our team does not have the luxury of sneaking anything through, right? Because
Hmm.
we need to provide accurate sort of
Yeah. When I said
bookkeeping.
sneaking, I meant the clients of the accountants, not your team.
Oh yeah, exactly. Now the difficulty for them is that now there's two layers of checks happening. One is from us,
Okay.
the second is from the accountant. So yeah, for them it can be a headache.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm just want to, because we're going to run out of time. So tell me some results that you're getting with your customers at the moment. Where are they really feeling the impact that your service has on their business?
Um, the the biggest impact that we have had, we did a case study recently, is we did an interview with a customer, and
Hmm.
they had proven time savings of 60%,
Oh wow.
right? Which was massive. Now,
Yeah.
this was not just outsourcing, it was also we had built in some automation tools for them, along with the
Mhm.
service that we are providing, the bookkeeping and other accounts support services we are providing. But the result was over a 2-year period, they had 60% time savings, which directly kind of resulted in massive cost savings to them. Okay.
Hmm.
Then the second impact we had with another firm is that they were now able to move after being with us for 3 years. After 3 years, they moved 80% of their uh, uh, their staff members to customer satisfaction and business development.
Okay.
So these again, this gave their team the opportunity to do something much more interesting. And also,
Hmm.
as a company, they were able to grow much more because now they had a bigger team who could do business sales related activities and customer satisfaction roles.
Hmm. It's funny. I'm starting to run a series of webinars about how to open up sales conversations, and I would like accountants to start inviting their staff on them, because the staff are the ones that have the conversations, but they're also the ones that are very, very nervous about opening up sales conversations because they haven't been trained in it. They haven't been given the authority to have conversations. But from what you're saying is it would be it would be good. The ideal situation is to have the repetitive work done by a team, an outsourced team, and encourage them to move into this role. Do you see that becoming more common over the next few years?
I believe so, and there's already a trend of that happening because
Mm.
staff retention is a big problem at the moment in majority of the industry areas, accounting being
Yeah.
one of the hardest hit. So being able to offer your staff, internal staff,
Mm.
various different types of roles with possibility
Mm.
of salary raises as well. So and the ability to work hybrid or remote, which is all can all be facilitated by outsourcing your repeated, repetitive, monotonous work to somebody else.
Mm.
Um, is probably, yeah, we are going to see more and more of that happening within companies.
Mm. I would imagine there are a few that will be absolutely, I want to continue doing my job and I don't want to do anything outside of that. I know a few people who particularly enjoy routine and process, and that's all they want to do. So I would imagine there's both sides of the coin in every organization.
And you need such people too, because you need
Yeah,
all types of people to run a successful company.
yeah. But it's about providing the ability for people to move up
Oh,
should they want to.
correct.
One final question for you. What is the sexiest thing about accountants?
Sexiest thing about accountants, apart from the accountants themselves, you mean?
About from the what?
Uh, apart from the accountants themselves, because now you
Apart,
get to
you
see.
can say the accountants themselves. You can say someone specific if it floats your boat, Pratheesh.
No, it's just that traditionally, when you try to picture an accountant, you were thinking about an elderly gentleman, a man, generally speaking, right? That's what
Yeah.
you would picture an accountant. But
And
things are
you're saying
changing
you're
now.
not finding that attractive.
Well, yeah, back in the days, I might not have been attractive to that age group, but now you're getting to see um, more younger and more diverse people
Yeah.
involved in the accounting industry. It's still a difficult profession to choose because there are so many other more attractive, more lucrative professions to choose from. But what would be the most sexiest aspect would be for me if my accountant calls me and says, look, you are spending way more on this aspect of your business. You should put that money into this, which will help you grow the business. And that would, for me, would be the sexiest part of an accountant. Like,
Yes.
rather than me just sitting with an accountant on a end of the year and they're saying, just sign here. That's it. You owe this much to the revenue.
Yeah, I think you are spot on. Like the impact that the accountant can have on the business, that is damn sexy. And I will keep reminding accountants of this all the way through the podcast and forevermore. Um, Pratheesh, you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you ever so much for coming on. I know that we had some trouble recording this twice, not once, but twice. So I appreciate your patience. If people would like to come and find out more about what you do, how you operate, where can they find you? Is LinkedIn the best place?
LinkedIn would be a good place. Besides that, they can go on to the website as well. It could be www.capisso.com. But yeah, LinkedIn would be the primary channel that they could use to get in touch with me or to
Yeah.
learn more about me.
What I will do for you is I will drop both links into the summary. So go and find Pratheesh, find out what it's all about, and see if outsourcing is something that's going to help your business. Right. Once again, thank you ever so much, and I will see you again next week.
Thank you very much.